In the not-too-distant future, following the rapid succession of World Wars III and IV, plus the hidden horrors of secret World War II, there's not much left. All that remains is a place where folks get together to read and discuss comic books. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they argue, but they always record and upload their transmissions. You've found one of those transmissions today. Welcome to the last comic shop.
Live from the snowy banks of Mount Kilimanjaro, it is now time for the last comic shop. And on today's program, it's a repeat of sorts for those folks that tuned in to the live stream for The Cure several weeks ago when we raised money for the Cancer Research Institute. We have decided to revisit the book that we covered on that particular program. It is Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. And for those folks wondering why I brought up Kilimanjaro, for no other reason than it gave Superman and Spider-Man someplace to go for a little while. But in any case, we did that show back in May, and it was very, very successful. But we know that there were some fans that did not get a chance to hear myself, the host with the most, Danny Larson, as well as my co-host Jay Scott and Chad Smith, talk about that particular book. And given it's the summer, we might as well not do any work and just talk about a book we already reviewed at some point. Guys, in a fight between Superman and Spider-Man, who do you got?
Well, it depends. Is Luthor's red sun ray involved at all?
Sure. I mean, it seems like Spider-Man, I don't know, that juiced him up a little bit. That was like some roid rage from the old web swinger when he got that red sun.
Heck yeah, but that was Spidey in the 70s, man. He was always popping off and just punching people.
It's like when you have a really, really bad NFL team and they say, oh, I bet some college team would beat them up. No. Okay, it's kids versus adults. You've got on one side men who can play the sport, and on the other side you have kids who are learning how to play the sport. So Spider-Man is the kid in this case, and he is in college. So the analogy perfectly works.
Name one Marvel character that you would put up against Superman, and you think that he would come out on top. I know who you're going to pick, but I was wondering if you would pick somebody else.
Well, I mean, Silver Surfer is the obvious one, but actually, I think Silver Surfer and Superman might be able to go toe-to-toe with Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer would have to take him to a place in the cosmos where there's red suns, and there's plenty of them.
My question to Chad is, what do you think of Superman versus, like, the God Thor that we read in the Donny Cates run? You think that's an even match? I mean, he killed Galactus, for God's sakes.
I was going to say, is Donny Cates writing it? And does he have something against Superman? Because that's really all it takes.
That is true. If you've got an axe to grind with any of these versus fight, it all depends on what the writer wants. Like, they can pretty much figure out like some way for anyone to be. I mean, Batman hung with the Hulk and didn't get killed.
He leapt through a car. I didn't know he had those powers.
But yeah, I mean, all you need to do really is, if you're fighting Superman, just team up with Dead Earth Wonder Woman, and she'll take him out.
It's true. That's
and then
very
beat
true.
you with his spine. I'd be careful with Dead Earth Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, these verses, some people get really into them. I don't. I think they're kind of academic at times, and folks start popping off at the mouth about, like, ridiculously obscure facts. I think I'm with Chad that it all depends on the writer. Like, any writer could make anybody godly powerful for a second or two and pop Superman in the chops. It just happens. But we don't play a lot of games on this particular program. We like to get into the books, but I thought we'd really quickly play a game of mashups for all of our fans. And if you don't know what mashups is, it's basically where each of us take two characters and we throw it out to one of the other co-hosts, and they have to basically mash those two characters up and create a new character out of it. So for this particular round, I will give to Chad, Chad will give to J.A., J.A. will give to me, and then we'll get to commercial break. So I will start And I think that I'm going to throw out to Chad. First off, I'm going to take one of my favorite characters of all time from comic books, and Dr. Doom. And then somebody else that has a moniker before their name, Mr. Spock. So you've got Dr. Doom and Mr. Spock. Smush them together. What are you doing with those two guys?
This is tough because I don't watch or care about Star Trek. I know Spock has pointy ears. I don't know if Dr. Doom has ears. I don't know. This is... All right, so here's what we'll do. So, Dr. Doom, Latvian king and ruler and all that, will forgo his crown.
Okay.
And he will travel the country, selling and promoting his book about how to raise babies. Because everyone knows Dr. Spock is very famous for teaching people how to raise their babies. Oh. So he will secretly use this book to imprint his Doom-like influence upon an entire generation of future Doomlings. And when the time is right, he will activate them and have not just the throne of Latveria, but all of the world in his mighty metal grasp. Yes, I've also never read Dr. Spock's book. I thought it was weird that a Star Trek character was a main influence in parenting. And so I just skipped it altogether.
All right. Well, I think that was a good mashup. I like it. So, Chad, you're up. You've got two characters to throw over to J.A. Who you picking?
Let's do Warlock and Hawkman.
Hawkman.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
So Adam Warlock and Hawkman.
Oh, no, not Adam Warlock.
Oh,
Warlock.
From the X-Men.
The robot.
New Mutants, yes.
Ah!
I know Jay's been catching up on his New Mutants recently.
Okay. Warlock and Hawkman combined to create a new character called Warman.
Okay.
Not to be confused with his mortal enemy, Lockhawk.
That sounds straight out of Marvel in the 90s. Lock.
Both of these characters are brothers who have been separated at birth. Hawklock has been raised on Thanagar, while Warman has been raised by his biological father on Warlock's planet. And they meet in their teenage years on Earth. Can they be friends? Do they hate each other? One has been raised to destroy all the world and take it over with his technology, while the other one has been raised with the spirit of freedom and to just enjoy flying around with his hawk wings.
Which one has the scar? All twins. There's one that gets the scar.
That would be Hawklock has the scar.
Yeah. Can Hawklock be drawn by Rob Liefeld? Because I feel like that would have been a character Rob Liefeld would.
Yes.
Look at Hawklock. He's the new member of Youngblood.
And the in the penultimate issue, when they finally have their bonding before the final issue, where it's the big fight against the big bad, they meet and hash it all out at a 1990s era Pizza Hut.
I was hoping that they would make bunk beds. It was just me. It would be like Step Brothers or something. I think Hawklock is a slam dunk. I would have bought a book with Hawklock in it for sure. All right, J.A., your pick for me. Who are your two characters you're slamming together?
Okay, so in honor of the Marvel DC team-up, we're going to go with one of DC's biggest stars in Batman. And from the Marvel end, we're going to go with one of their most obscure characters, but dear to my own heart and yours, the Impossible Man.
Oh, this is too easy. One day, Batmite gets tired of all of Batman's shit. Like basically not paying attention to him and making fun of him all the time and says, "No, Batman, you're going to live my life for a change. You're going to have these powers where you can be ridiculous and obscure and recreate your body in all kinds of weird ways, and nobody will take you seriously." So he just waves his magic fairy Batmite hands, and Batman, again, completely loses all inhibitions, becoming the new character of Bat Crazy. And ultimately, decides he's just going to have fun for once, which is totally takes the DC universe by surprise. All of a sudden, he turns into a surfboard, and he starts riding himself on, like, the waves, and then he turns himself into a bottle of shark repellent at one point and hands himself to Robin, and Robin doesn't know what to do with that. He just ends up having a lot of fun.
There you go. I just can't imagine Batman using his powers and gadgets for fun.
That's right. Yeah. It's amazing. Superman is aghast when he turns himself into his own Batmobile and says, "Hey, Superman, you want to ride around on these wheels?" It's fun. It's fun, and it's clever, and I like it. Then he wakes up the next day, and everybody's making fun of him, and he's like, "Why are you making fun of me? I don't remember what I did." And they were like, "Remember when you were bat crazy?" And remember when we went to commercial break? Because that's about to happen. We'll be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop. Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man coming up right after these messages.
It was the three-legged dog of comics.
It was bad.
These two gentlemen met in jail, and then when they got out, they started publishing.
It should have been mobsters instead of doing what they do in comics.
Management there was questionable at times.
Some of it has to do with people who go to jail.
We are sinners. We have corrupted the youth.
Stuff that should never have been sold to kids.
And then there was Charlton. I couldn't quite tell what they were doing.
Charlton was just a hodgepodge of weird titles.
What is this? Who am I dealing with?
John threw nickels around like they were manhole covers.
CATAP. They were cheap.
Hell yes, they're cheap.
They were a special kind of special is what they were.
Printing was horrible.
You could smell them beginning to decay even as they were rolling off the press.
At one point, they actually did have to move the comics operation into a bowling alley.
It's something out of a sitcom.
We want to publish comic books in the worst way, and they did.
It's been called the street-fighting cousin of Marvel and DC. Maybe you've heard of them. Probably not. But you do know the industry legends that called it home. This is Charlton Comics. Follow at charltonmovie.com.
Oh, it's going to suck.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our review of Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, which, again, you might have already heard this. So if you have, just make sure that you pay attention this time.
Battle of the Century.
Oh, that's true.
You keep leaving that part out.
That's right. It is very important to Chad. Like, it's the fact that they keep on saying it was the battle. I would have said the millennium, to be honest, because now, we're already out of that century. Who cares? What's the battle of this century?
That battle is Batman versus Snake Eyes versus Fortnite.
It is going to get the kids. They've been buying those issues up like crazy.
They want
Need that online code, man. Give me those online codes.
That's it.
But this is most definitely a Bronze Age masterpiece. The greatest superhero team-up of all time.
Yeah. It's from 1976. And, a lot of people worked on it because it was a big to-do. They did do a joint publication of The Wizard of Oz previous to that, but this is the first time where they took two characters from their own rosters of characters and teamed them up in the same book. So,
and do you remember why they did that?
Didn't they want to make a movie?
Yes, David Obst had the idea to make a Spider-Man versus Superman movie, which I looked up David Obst and found out he was responsible for things like Revenge of the Nerds later. So
Nerds!
We could have had a movie on those lines with these two. But the Superman movie was already in production, so they're like, that's not in the cards. But they put out this glorious treasury-sized $2 tabloid Battle of the Century with both their key characters, with a ton of incredible talent in there.
And speaking of some of that talent, I'm just trying to think of, and I'm just going to list them off the top of my head. Now, everybody can jump in with the ones that I forgot. But it was written by Jerry Conway. I know that because Jerry Conway is probably my favorite of the Bronze Age writers, because he was the guy that was writing Amazing Spider-Man during the Bronze Age. He was the one that ended up killing Gwen Stacy and got, Spider-Man and Mary Jane finally together. So, I have a soft spot in my heart for Jerry Conway. I still read Jerry Conway books when they're put out. I know a couple years ago he was writing the Spider-Man family when officially Spider-Man and Mary Jane were broken up. He put them back together and gave him a kid, and it was awesome.
And I think he got the job because he was one of the only ones who had written both characters. He had also written Superman at that time, so they went with a writer who knew actually both characters, and so that he could play both, sort of how Spider-Man is written in the Marvel sense and how Superman is written in the DC sense. So I think that was a good choice.
Yes. The artist for this was Ross Andrew, although Chad has some interesting stories about that. But again, he's another of my favorites from the Bronze Age because he was primarily the guy that was drawing Amazing Spider-Man during the Bronze Age. And so, like, a lot of the times when I think about who my definitive Spider-Man is, I'm like, oh, it's John Romita. No, it actually is Ross Andrew because I like more of his issues. But John Romita did work on this, right, Chad?
That's true. Because this book was such a big deal, the big rumor was that John Romita Sr. had been touching up some of the Spider-Man pictures, which he was wont to do as Marvel's art director at the time. So he was doing touch-ups. So when the DC pages came in, Neil Adams walked over and said, hey, do you mind if I take a look at these and take a swing at them? And so Ross Andrew gave the okay, apparently, and so Neil Adams touched up some of the Superman shots in here.
Well, there you go.
And it was inked by Dick Giordano, who was a big head honcho at DC, but also, so one of his primary assistants at the time was Terry Austin, who you might remember from all his work with John Byrne and Art Adams and just throughout the 80s and 90s, making everybody's art look that much better. Or did the backgrounds on this book. And then Bob Wycheck inked 3 or 4 pages in here.
Yeah, and at first when Chad told me this, I was trying to find where the touch-ups were. I mean, the thing about all of these artists is they have a very similar style, to be honest. And when you have that many hands working on a book like this, I kept on thinking it was the times in which, like, it seemed like Superman or Spider-Man had, like, a halo around them. They were, like, cut out in, like, white chalk or something. It's like a weird outline or something. Turns out I don't think those were the touch-ups. I could be completely wrong. I don't know which ones they actually were. But
yeah, no, you can tell in the faces especially. Like, I'm looking at on page 11 where there's, like, Lex Luthor's face, and you can tell Neil Adams had that... his style was slightly more realistic than Ross Andrew. You know, it was fun. I was looking through pretty closely after I found that out, which I did not know that. I picked it up listening to Rob Liefeld's podcast. Rob Liefeld strikes again. But you can tell that Superman and Spider-Man especially, they look like they're drawn by 2 different artists. You know, with the way the musculature works and the way that their costumes are set up, like Spider-Man's a much smoother style. Whereas the Superman, you know, you can see more of the muscles. You can see more of the... Whereas the Neil Adams and, you know, those big moments, you can tell Neil was there.
And, just to round out the who's who on this book, of course, it was edited by Carmine Infantino and Stan Lee with consulting editors, you know, because they're not quite as good, but they're also really freaking good. Roy Thomas, Julius Schwartz, Marv Wolfman, E. Nelson Bridgewell. So, yeah, a who's who of the 1970s comic book industry.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, too, this is something, and Andy and I were talking about this earlier, about how this is tough to get a hold of because it's a Marvel DC crossover. Like, I have the 1995 reprint. So back when Marvel and DC were doing all that amalgam universe stuff, they reprinted these with golden covers. And then they were also reprinted in the crossover classics, which also had things like the X-Men and Titans and the Batman and Hulk crossover in there. But I had the luxury, I have the Treasury edition and I had the gold bordered cover. I flipping through and I noticed a couple of differences. One of which, in the original Treasury edition, it's presented by Carmine Infantino and Stan Lee instead of edited by Carmine Infantino and Stan Lee. They changed it. I also read an interview where Jerry Conway claimed that he was pretty much the actual editor handling the day-to-day stuff, and just Carmine and Infantino and Stan Lee put their names on it. But the other thing that was neat was apparently whenever they reprinted these, they must have gotten some of their prints, some of their scans from the Spanish edition, because there's a security guard See it when Lex Luthor and Doc Ock are breaking out of jail. He's got the little Seguridad Espanol badge on his arm, but it just says security in the original.
Ah!
So, lots of little differences I was picking out here as I went along.
But it is one of those books. It's very, very hard to find nowadays. As we'll get to in my initial thoughts, like, that's really sad that it's hard to get a hold of. But J.A., do you want to give us the 10-cent synopsis of what happens in the Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man? How do these guys end up slugging it out?
After a couple of prologues where we're introduced to the main villains and heroes of the story, so that would be Superman, Spider-Man, Doc Ock, and Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor and Doc Ock are thrown in jail together and conspire to break out, which leads us to probably one of the greatest panels in this entire book, where Lex Luthor is piggyback riding on Doc Ock as they scale over the prison fence.
Really hard to tell whose legs are who in that one.
Once they've broken out of jail, they conspire, these two ultra villains, to take out Superman and Spider-Man, eliminating them from the world, therefore allowing Doc Ock and Lex Luthor to get on with their lives without the meddling interference of their arch enemies. This all takes place around a news convention in New York City. So Peter Parker and Clark Kent happen to be in the same location to watch this communication satellite get beamed up into space. There's a bit of a James Bond Thunderball theme aspect to it, which I think was around this time. So they sort of cribbed a little bit from Ian Fleming.
Yeah, it's definitely shades of Moonraker there, I think.
So, long story short, Doc Ock and Lex Luthor end up stealing Mary Jane and Lois Lane. There's a robot. Sorry, it's Lex Luthor in a Superman illusion outfit. Hits Spider-Man, and then blasts Superman with a red sunbeam so that Superman and Spider-Man are on sort of equal footing. And the one thing I didn't like about this, and we'll get into that in more of my review, is how young and quick to fly off the handle Spider-Man is. So Spider-Man loses his cool, starts beating the crap out of Superman, who is weakened until he's not weakened, and then you get some funny scenes where Spider-Man is just punching the crap out of Superman, and Superman's just standing there looking at him. Yeah, are you done yet? I think we've been set up. Calm down. They team up, go to Kilimanjaro for some weird... totally forgot about that. That was so out of left field.
Yes.
Lex Luthor's dastardly plan is to destroy the entire Earth so he can watch and rule over the Dark Husk from space. Doc Ock not so cool with this when he finds this out, because Doc Ock, if there's no Earth for me to steal stuff from, what's the point? Superman and Spider-Man team up, battle them, and in the end... end up shaking hands, and you get a throwaway line where Spider-Man's like, I hope I don't have to shake his hand many more times because it hurts. Ouch.
You forgot all about the free dinner. They got free dinners. J. Jonah Jameson never gives anything free. You can tell that Stan Lee had some influence on this, because Stan Lee was like, you know what's going to be great? Let's make J. Jonah Jameson give Peter Parker finally a free meal. That's complete fiction.
But don't you know there is no such thing as a free meal?
He did have to go to Kilimanjaro to get this, I guess. On spider skis.
I love the web skis every time they travel.
I don't understand how that works. Like, air skiing, like, over there? Like, what happens when he was on the mountains?
To paint the picture, it's essentially Spider-Man has shot a web out for Superman to hold on to, and is then look like water skiing behind him with skis made out of web fluid in the air. Logically makes no sense.
Yeah, if you're looking for logic, you're looking in the wrong spot on this one.
Yeah, this one jumps off the rails so many times, and that's going to be my initial thoughts. I mean, I'm hoping that nobody that goes into this particular story is going to be going into this with some sort of, I hate to say it, serious mindset. Because if you are, boy, you're going to probably put this down like 3 pages in and say, this is awful. Like, I don't believe this at all. They're not even fighting. this wasn't a spare fight to begin with, and I know power levels. And, if you're going to be one of those people that comes to this particular book, then forget it. Go somewhere else. But if you love Saturday morning cartoons, if you grew up in the 80s like I did, and you enjoyed Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends or the Super Friends or whatever, then this is great. This is just fun. This is silly stuff that, again, doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense and doesn't have to. It really doesn't. It's just an opportunity for them to get, Superman and Spider-Man in the same room together and let them have a fun adventure. And if you're in for that and you happen to be 10 years old, then this is right up your alley.
Yeah, and I love how they play with all these sort of fantastic tropes and then kind of just throw it in your face. Like, you've got Doc Ock, here's a character, a main supervillain who wears glasses. And in the big fight, his glasses get knocked off and he can't fight because he can't find his glasses.
It was all Velma from Scooby-Doo.
Yes, how fun is that? And surely he's smart enough, he would have designed Rex Specs.
For me, my favorite part about this book is how much Spider-Man and Superman are both huge jerks. Like, the entire time, Clark's on the escalator going up to the New York conference like, man, New York is filthy. And then that's after he was fighting Lex Luthor, and his plan to defeat Luthor was to drown him. He just shot a hole into the boat, and all the water's pouring in, and Lex is like, I'm gonna die! Like, there's your Boy Scout Superman. He's like, okay, I guess I'll rescue you.
Right.
But between that and Spider-Man, like, Spider-Man just goes off against everybody. J. Jonah Jameson, like, I love that scene where J. Jonah Jameson's trying to kill him with his bare hands because he brushed in the pictures, and the pictures are all just shadows. It's just such unchecked emotion. And then you get the feud, you get the fight between Spider-Man and Superman where they're on that equal playing field. And there's no talking or reason. And it's like, wait a minute. First off, there was a Superman imposter that just kidnapped people. But Superman, being a giant dick, sees Spider-Man in the neighborhood and decides Spider-Man must have done that thing. I'm going to punch him. And then Spider-Man is like, no, I'm a giant dick. And they start fighting and pounding it out. And it was great until we get Superman, who's like, he can build an entire computer from his photogenic memory. And if he can do all that in a split second, why is he fighting Doc Ock? He's just picking on a guy with glasses.
That's right. That is true. I mean, maybe I'm used to the Spider-Man from the 70s because, again, I think Jerry Conway wrote him back like that in some of the Amazing Spider-Man issues where he could just be kind of like a jerkbag at times and fly off the handle, and he was very emotional and stuff like that. But like Superman, he's just a smug son of a bitch in this. He's like, oh, by the way, sorry about this computer, but heck, I can build it. Or heck, when they go visit those local natives and they're like, here's our most sacred drink, Superman, milk and cow blood. And he's like, no thanks. Like, I can be a complete douchebag and just completely disregard some of your most sacred traditions. I'm Superman. And it's just like, it's the most anti-Superman thing that ever happened. Superman would have done that. He would have drank it and said thank you, and then he would have gone and done his Superman stuff, right?
Act like that. At least pretended. He could have thrown it away at super speed. Nobody would have known.
But it's all in good fun. I mean, it really is. Like,
right. And like, you've got, where else can you get a scene where you've got this giant tidal wave that's about to crash and destroy the whole eastern seaboard, and Superman just flies down it at super Mach speed and destroys the tidal wave with sound.
Yes.
Don't know how that works.
That's pre-crisis Superman for you. Like, he had every power under the sun.
This is,
literally.
to me, it's the Superman who flies around the Earth backwards to turn back time.
Yes. Yeah.
That would come in like a year. 2 years.
Absolutely. Now, that was the reason that they ultimately didn't end up making the Superman Spider-Man movie, is because they were already in work of the Superman movie we got with the great Marlon Brando, and they paid him a lot of money. And Sexy Lex.
And he read his lines off of a baby.
He read his lines off of a baby.
Did you never hear that?
Yeah, no,
he had the baby in the scenes, and he wrote his lines on the baby.
Because you're Marlon Brando. Like Superman, you can just be a smug son of a bitch and just get away with it. Anyways, we've got more of The Last Comic Shop coming up right after these messages. We're going to get our rating for Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. So stay tuned for that, as well as some recommendations of other times when folks fought each other. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, Brian Thomas here from the former The Batman vs. James Bond show and the upcoming The Night Cave show. Do you like noir, black and white gritty murder mysteries? Do you like crime stories or even pulp comics? Then you're gonna love Nick Palahniuk's debut graphic novel entitled The Greenway. It's 1968, and Butch Schultz, a black market merchant, finds that his friend has been murdered in a mansion in St. Paul. Now he is out looking for who did it, while the city's best detectives are on the case. Nick's graphic novel is already getting rave reviews, let me tell you. Zero Supervision Comics podcast says, a dark, intriguing story that makes you want to know more. The Glenn Thinks Stuff podcast says, it's explosive, captivating, and alluring. And actor Kyle Hester from The Chair, Zombie with a Shotgun, and Preacher 6 says, can't wait for this book. You got to get on this. Order your copy today at Indie Planet, A New World of Comics. That's www.indieplanet.com. Hard copies and digital copies are available, and now digital copies are only $5. That's where I said it, just $5. So make sure you order yours today.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our ratings, where we have the, again, audacity to say to so many people that are like legends within the comic industry that worked on this particular book. Does it hold up well? I think that's what we really have to kind of gauge our work on. At the time, this was gangbusters. But does this hold up to modern comic book fans or folks that aren't 9 years old? JA always gives us a rating scale for these particular programs. And this week, what is our rating scale for Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man?
I was going to go with, a Toto-esque Reigns of Africa inspired something or other because of that weird Kilimanjaro scene, but I'm going to have to go with something that was sort of a MacGuffin in this whole storyline, but I don't see repeated that much in normal Superman comics. Do you think it would play a bigger part, which was Lex Luthor's Red Sun ray gun?
Yeah, it was super important, and I don't know why Lex Luthor didn't just continually blast Superman or anybody else with that gun, because it seems like the perfect way to defeat Superman at any time. I don't know why he didn't use it more often. He's like, yeah, I just got to use it.
Well, because Doc Ock stole it. He made sure it went down with the ship. Doc Ock is the hero of this whole story.
and what's the difference between the Red Sun ray gun and kryptonite?
Good question. Leave a comment. If you're one of those comic book folks out there, tell us. Tell us what the difference is, because we'd love to know. We'd love to know. And what I'd also love to know is what my good friend and co-host Chad Smith is rating this particular book.
This is tough. I mean, there's so much that doesn't make sense. They give Spider-Man a spaceship like that.
That happens all the time. Like when you have like little toys. Like anytime they're trying to package a toy, they're like, yeah, give him a rocket ship. Who cares?
No, I love this thing. I think it's beautiful. The art is fantastic. People that know me know that I go gaga over the Treasury editions and just seeing comics embiggened. Like, it's beautiful. It's so great. And like, you can see the little fine details. You can see where Terry Austin was signing things in the background with this Austin bread, and like that was tons of fun. The plot, it was just a chance to mash these two characters together. Do I think it holds up to modern sensibilities? Probably not. I mean, you have the girls that are just kidnapped, and they explicitly state that they're just damsels in distress. Like, there's not a lot of agency there. But it's fun to watch Superman and Spider-Man interact. It's fun to watch them both be kind of jerky to each other. And it's fun to watch them whenever they finally decided to work together. So it has all the things you want out of one of these superhero team-ups. So I'm going to 3.5 ray guns.
All right, 3.5. That works. J.A., what is your rating?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with Chad on this. It's very much like those 1970s B movies that would come on TV and you don't turn it off because it's just a lot of fun. The plot doesn't have to make sense. There's just things happening, and you go from line to line, dialogue piece to dialogue piece, set battle to set battle, and you just enjoy it for what it is. Why they have to go to Kilimanjaro to do this, to do that, to do this, to do that, who cares? Why are Mary Jane and Lois Lane in the hamster ball? Who cares? It's just a fun story. I give it a solid 3 Red Sun ray guns.
Well, I'm glad that Chad brought up the fact that the art in this book is tremendous, because I think for me in my rating, the art has a lot to do with it getting a good rating at all. Like, I'll be honest, like, you know, if it hadn't been for like the who's who of fantastic artists that worked on this particular, all of which I love, like the only person missing from this Mount Rushmore of awesome 70s artists is John Buscema. I mean, if John had worked on this too, forget it. Like, I mean, then you would have had John Romita, John Buscema, you would have had Neil Adams, you would have had Ross Andrew, just so many great folks.
Imagine if they put this out now, or they had the sensibility where you get all the guest cover artists. Imagine all the different covers we could have had in the 70s with all these different great 70s artists. Like, you could have had a Barry Windsor Smith cover, an Alfreda Akala painted cover. Oh, man, just...
And that's the thing. The art is tremendous. And plus you get, you know, Dick Giordano on inks. You get Terry Austin on inks. Again, those are two of my favorites, inkers as well. And so for me, that makes like the art in this book like a 4. You should read this book if you're a comic book fan for no other reason than the art. If you're reading it for the story, if you're reading it for like the fact that I want to see Spider-Man and Superman throw down, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. And I feel like, I hate to say it because I like Jerry Conway, but the story is like a 1.5. You know, there's giant robots for no good reason. Lex Luthor has a plan to destroy the planet for the reason, because he was thrown in jail, because he's crazy, because he just wants to see things get drowned in a title. I don't understand it. And I think that's why Doc Ock in the end says, nah, I'm out of this, because none of this makes sense and it's all wonky. I want to just go back to teaming up with people like the Electro and Craven, because they seem to have one foot in this reality. So I think it's going to come down from the 4, and I think it's going to be about a 2.5, maybe a 2.75 ray guns. It's not yet a 3, because there are better crossovers out there. There's actually a sequel to this that's called, I think it's Spider-Man and Superman. It's got Doctor Doom in it. It's got Parasite, which I think are much more worthy foes for the likes of people like Superman. It's also written by Jim Shooter, which I like Jim Shooter in terms of the writing duties a little bit more than even Jerry Conway. So you can check that out. I think it holds up a little bit better than the original outing. But yeah, 2.5, because it's still worth your time. If you are a comic book historian, if you like comic books, you want to see where things came from, find it, read it. It's worth your time. It's like Superman versus Muhammad Ali. These things are worth your time in checking out. And some other things that are worth checking out in your free time are our recommendations. We always like to throw out some comic books that you should pick up at your local comic book store, in addition to Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, if you can find it. It's real hard to find now. Gosh, but these other books I think we're going to recommend are actually, I think, a little bit easier. And we always like to do a similar book, a current book, and a book out of left field. And we're going to start off with a similar book because it comes in the same freaking book as Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. And that comes from our good friend Chad Smith. Chad, what else was in that Crossover Classics Volume 1 that you want to talk about?
Yes, well, while Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, the Battle of the Century, was the first big crossover, and it was fun to watch those toys play together. The story, as we mentioned, it didn't entirely gel the entire time, but by the time Marvel and DC got around to the Uncanny X-Men and the new Teen Titans, which was written by Chris Claremont, with art by Walt Simonson, inks by Terry Austin, a name we've talked about before. This is the epitome of crossovers, where the dark side summons the Dark Phoenix, And the X-Men and the Teen Titans have to team up and to face down two of the biggest bads in the history of comics. And this is not just one of the best crossover comics. In my opinion, this is one of the best comics ever. I was fortunate enough to pick this up as a youngster, and it's one of those things where everything in this comic, it just gels so well. Chris Claremont has the X-Men do a Danger Room scenario, and that's tons of fun. And then the Teen Titans break into the mansion, and you get to see the Titans interacting together. But like every single piece of this book worked to perfection, and that's even before you got to the Dark Side stuff. And so I just think this is one of the greatest examples of how to do a crossover so that everybody comes out looking great. There was even a little intermingling of the characters where Kitty Pryde and Changeling have a real brief romance. That was fun, and you get to watch Colossus get all jealous midway through. Like, it was just, this is how you mix your characters together. It's one of the best crossovers and one of the best comics of all time. The Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans. If you can find a copy, by all means, make sure you get your hands on this one.
Okay. Well, I'll go up next, and I'll give us our current book. And this was released in 2019, and it gives an opportunity for somebody with an equal power set, as we talked about before, to actually fight Superman. It's not the Superman that we all think. It's actually the Injustice version of Superman, which is still a Superman and is a colossal douchebag. This is the Injustice versus the Masters of the Universe. It was written by Tim Seeley with Freddie Williams III doing art duties. And it's kind of a little bit of a sequel to a previous crossover with the Masters of the Universe that occurred, I think, a year before, when the Masters of the Universe finally fought the Thundercats. Some of the fallout from that particular event, where those two classic cartoon franchises clashed, was the fact that He-Man had to reveal to the entire planet of Eternia that he was actually Prince Adam. And so you've got at the beginning of this particular story a He-Man that really is kind of in turmoil about who his inner character actually is. Is he Adam or is he He-Man? Because these are two different parts of his personality, and he doesn't know which one should be, in charge, I guess. And again, while this all is happening, Damian Wayne and a group of Resistance fighters arrives on Eternia from the Injustice version of Earth in hopes of recruiting this, conflicted He-Man into toppling the Superman that has basically taken over their planet, has set up a totalitarian regime, and is, again, a complete D-bag, as I mentioned. And they're hoping He-Man can do it because, as we all know, Superman is vulnerable to magic. And that's where He-Man gets his powers from. And so basically it ends up being kind of a slugfest between Supes and He-Man. And I got to say that one of the great things that I picked up from this particular book and why I recommend it a lot, Tim Seeley does a really great job of crafting a solid tale about the importance of maintaining your humility and your humanity, even though others might treat you like a god. I think that's kind of something that's universal. Like anybody that starts getting more of a swelled head, if you're popular, if you're, we've all kind of go through this, and those people that can kind of still ground themselves and, still maintain that common ground and that commonality with their fellow people, they're the ones that end up succeeding. Those people that end up getting the swelled heads and think they're all that in a bag of chips, they're going to end up being the ones that the hubris causes the fall. And so it's really well framed in this particular story that really He-Man does need Prince Adam, very similar to Superman needing Clark Kent. And that's actually the problem with why Superman went crazy, is because he stopped being Clark Kent and he stopped being a human and having that link to the people that he was supposed to be protecting. And at the end of the day, He-Man wins, which is why I like the book. It's got some minor subplots with, Skeletor getting the Shazam powers and Darkseid shows up for a little while, but it's really just a really well-crafted tale about, again, why Superman should always be grounded in the humanity of Clark Kent, and why that ends up being the reason why He-Man triumphs in the end.
Well, I thought he was going to triumph simply because he outreaches Superman. I mean, He-Man is a 6-inch figure. Superman is a 3 3/4 inch figure.
Yeah.
That too.
You're so wrong on so many levels.
He's got a freaking sword, okay? He can stab people. Superman doesn't have a stabbing thing. Like, he doesn't have a stabber. Anyways, you've got the Out of Left Field book this week, J.A. What's our Out of Left Field book this week?
So Out of Left Field is a fun book. I think first came out in the late 90s. The Incredible Hulk versus Superman. By Roger Stern, with pencils by Steve Rude. Inker is Al Milgrom, letters Jim Novak, and beautiful colors by Steve Oliff. And this is a sort of a throwback story. So it's Silver Age Hulk versus almost what I would say almost a Golden Age Superman. So this is like in the time when Hulk is the raging beast, just going around the west of the United States and fighting the U.S. Army, and Superman goes in to cover this, and they end up fighting because Lex Luthor is there. He's trying to steal some gamma gun from the government, and Bruce Banner creates a Hulk robot so that Superman and the Hulk robot end up fighting, and then Superman and the Hulk end up fighting. They team up, kind of, but because Hulk is sort of Rage Hulk, Dumb Hulk, not so much, but it's just really capture Silver Age Hulk and Golden Age, Silver Age Superman just really well. It's beautifully drawn, and it fits. It makes sense that Lex Luthor isn't some guy there who's trying to destroy the planet. Here, he's just trying to get Superman to fight the real Hulk so that he can then shoot them both with the gamma gun. So, I mean, the plot makes a lot more sense in one of these than the Spider-Man versus Superman sort of contrived nature. And it's got all these kind of nice touches. So it's a throwback story, but at the same time they're using cell phones and fax machines, but also microfinch. And any story that has a panel or two of people doing research on microfinch, then you know it's going to be a good book.
The old school librarian in Jay comes out with the microfiche.
I will say it's a book I want to check out because I love both of those talents. I loved all of if anybody knows about me, I loved Roger Stern's run on The Amazing Spider-Man when he made him fight like the Juggernaut, and he did all the Hobgoblin stuff in the 80s. He also did the whole Under Siege thing with the Avengers. Plus, you got Steve Rude, who did Nexus. And I love me some Steve Rude, and especially anytime you get Steve Rude doing Silver Age, man, that stuff looks like it's like a page out of like Darwin Cook. Like, it's just great stuff. Like, actually, Darwin probably took his page out of Steve Rude because he was out before him. But
it's got a great take on, it's sort of the Gene Hackman-esque Lex Luthor. He's still got some hair on the sides. He's not completely bald yet.
That means he's still got a little bit of his sanity, just a tiny bit. He hasn't put on that purple tunic yet.
With all the pill containers.
What is he keeping those?
I don't know.
Pez.
Very good. Very good. Oh, maybe it's all his Viagra. I don't know. Sexy Lexi. In any case, make sure that you also check us out every single week over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It is our fantastic website where you can listen to all kinds of awesome past episodes of our podcast. We've got tons featuring at least Superman. I actually don't think we've done any books starring the Web Swinger yet. We have to get around to that sooner or later, I think. But at least check out some of our old shows with the Man of Steel, like Superman Smashes the Klan, or we did Superman versus Imperious Lex. Some neat shows out there. So check it out by rate, reviewing, and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, YouTube, CastBox, Pandora, Amazon Podcasts, and a variety of other places. And while you're out on our website, you should check out some terrific, what, J.A.?
merchandise. We've got t-shirts, we've got hoodies. Get yourself a mug, get yourself a can coolie. Or, this week only, specially branded, web-created water skis. Perfect for the summer vacation. The weather is turning warm. People are going out again. You can go water skiing without a mask. What do you need? You need some Last Comic Shop branded, web-made water skis.
They only last for an hour, though. So once you buy them, there's no refunds. Not giving any refunds.
And you know who else don't give refunds usually? Comic shops. But you can find a comic shop near you in the event you wanted to find a copy of Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, the Battle of the Century. Because as we alluded to, they're hard to come by. The corporate overlords at Disney and or AT&T or whoever owns DC now don't tend to play nicely. So it's probably going to be a long time before we get another crossover of this ilk. So you can head to the Comic Shop Locator at www.comicshoplocator.com to find a comic shop near you, where hopefully you can come across some of these fun stories from back in the day.
There you go. And until next time, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. And you all stay safe, stay sheltered, and make sure when you break out of prison that your Defiant One's partner has a couple extra arms and legs. Because you never know, it just might come in handy.
They needed different colored jumpsuits because the arms and the legs and the hands and the bodies and the torsos just kind of, it was hard to tell where one began and the other one ended.
I like how Lex was just yelling, wee!
It didn't look right, I tell you. It just did not look right. Too much prison time for those guys.